Rome has realized its mistake. This is no longer a slave revolt. This is a war against Rome itself. Spartacus' army has grown. Tens of thousands now stand behind him. But Rome does not forgive. The Senate is sending its most ruthless weapon into the field. In this chapter, slaves fighting for freedom face the iron fist of an empire. Because in Part 2, there is no escape, only war. Moreover, the slaves of these cities had also joined him, and within a year the number of the slave army had reached as many as 80,000. This meant nearly 1/4 of the Roman army. Despite possessing such power, Spartacus' goal was never to capture Rome. His goal was to cross the Alps, return to his homeland of Thrace, and be free there. However, not everyone around him shared the same opinion. Some were still after plunder, while others wanted to take revenge on Rome. One of the people with whom he experienced this difference of opinion was Spartacus, the Gallic warrior who was Spartacus' companion. Spartacus wanted to enter the heart of the empire, seize the city, and force Rome to kneel. The debates dragged on. No consensus could be reached. In the end, the army was divided into two. While Spartacus headed north with the main force of approximately 50,000 men, Spartacus remained in the south with 30,000 warriors. This split was an unmissable opportunity for the Roman Senate. Without wasting any time, they immediately took action. A Roman army of 40,000 men, composed of experienced and successful soldiers, began marching south under the command of the famous politician and general Lucius Gellius. The two sides came face to face near Mount Gargano. Spartacus and his men were quite exhausted because they had marched long distances. Despite this, the slave army launched the first attack. However, in every assault they were repelled as if they had crashed into a wall. Spartacus' men gradually began to melt away against the Roman professionals. Finally, with the death of Spartacus, the slave army, left without a leader, was completely annihilated. After the victory, Gellius and his army began moving north and marched against Spartacus. Meanwhile, another Roman army under the leadership of Claudius also moved north to prevent Spartacus from reaching the Alps. Rome's aim was to trap the rebels between two armies and completely destroy them. However, Spartacus trapped Claudius' army in a valley in the Apennine Mountains near Pistoia. After a fierce battle, the Roman army was largely destroyed. The surviving soldiers and Claudius were forced to flee. After this victory, Spartacus marched against Gellius and met them in Umbria. While Spartacus and his army won the battle fought between the two sides, Gellius fled the battlefield just like Claudius. The two defeated generals gathered their remaining few soldiers and once again marched against Spartacus. However, the Romans were defeated by Spartacus once again in the battle fought near Picenum. The Senate, having run out of patience, dismissed both generals from duty. In the eyes of the Senate, there was only one man who could erase this humiliation: Marcus Licinius Crassus. The richest man in Rome, a politician, and a ruthless general who would go down in history. A new army of 50,000 men was immediately formed and placed under the command of Marcus Crassus. Advancing north, Crassus positioned his army to the south of the Alps. Although Spartacus wanted to break through Crassus' forces, he was not successful. After losing 6,000 of his men in the battle fought there, he began to retreat southward. Moreover, his army was now thoroughly exhausted. For this reason, Spartacus decided to cross over to the island of Sicily. The island of Sicily was Rome's granary and had previously been the scene of many slave revolts. If he could get there, he could start a new wave of rebellion and perhaps drag Rome into a civil war lasting for years. For this purpose, he made a deal with pirates to transport them across. They set up camp in Reggio Calabria and began waiting for the pirates there. However, the pirates took the gold given to them and fled, abandoning Spartacus halfway. Realizing this, albeit late, Spartacus found himself trapped in a narrow area in southern Italy. Meanwhile, Crassus established an extraordinary defensive line to encircle Spartacus. He had a defensive line 60 kilometers long built at the narrowest point of the Italian peninsula. This defensive line was reinforced with trenches and walls. In addition, the Roman navy arrived to assist and surrounded the rebels from the sea. Spartacus and his army were now isolated both by land and by sea. As days passed, hunger began to set in and the army's morale started to deteriorate. Spartacus and his army managed to break through the defensive line with a sudden night raid. As they fled northward, Crassus pursued them. Moreover, the famous Roman general Pompeius and the Macedonian consul Lucullus were also coming to assist Crassus with their armies. Spartacus turned toward Brundisium, planning to cross to the opposite shore from there. However, when they arrived at Brundisium, they saw that Lucullus had landed. Their plans had fallen apart. As a last resort, Spartacus tried the path of negotiation by sending a letter to Crassus, but Crassus rejected it. Thereupon, Spartacus and his army began advancing north toward the Campania region. However, this time their path was blocked by Pompeius and his army. The year was 71 BC. The place was near the Silarus River. Spartacus and Crassus were facing each other once again. The slave army numbered approximately 50,000. Although their morale was weakened and their resources depleted, they were still free. Spartacus stepped forward before his men and delivered one final speech. "Today we will either leave here alive as if we were born free, or we will die as free warriors. Rome made us slaves, but we will determine our own destiny." After this speech, Spartacus and his men charged against the Roman army. The clash was extremely horrific. Every assault of the slave army met resistance as if crashing into a wall. As casualties increased, Spartacus drew his sword and ran toward Crassus' headquarters. He killed 2 high-ranking commanders but could not reach Crassus. When his guards were killed, he was surrounded by Roman soldiers. He fought heroically but did not survive. With his death, the slave army quickly dispersed. In this clash, approximately 50,000 slaves lost their lives, while the Roman army suffered 12,000 casualties. To serve as an example, General Crassus had the bodies of 6,000 rebels crucified along the road leading to Rome. Rome had once again emerged victorious. However, the rebellion started by Spartacus left behind marks that would not be easily forgotten. Moreover, despite months of searching, Spartacus' body could never be found, which made him even more legendary. According to some, he had managed to survive the battle and disappeared without a trace. Although Rome tried to erase his name, Spartacus inscribed his name in history in golden letters as a hero of freedom.